Another month has slipped by. That means it's time to stop and rank all 10 August new releases that I saw, from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. If you can relate, you're probably in the right place. Consider clicking that subscribe button. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Let me know, what is your ranking of the August new releases that you saw? And if I missed one you think that I would like, let me know about it. One more thing before we get started. Right now, there is a Labor Day sale going on in my merch store where you can get your own I Talk Movies Too Much t-shirt. If you're someone that does talk movies too much and you want to be able to publicly identify yourself as someone that does that, there's no better way than an I Talk Movies Too Much t-shirt. There should be like a little shelf below the video where you can actually browse through the different shirts in my merch store. That's a new feature that they recently added that is very, very helpful. You can check that out at that shelf or at the link in the description. With that said, let's get started. In last, Borderlands. Now, this movie is going to go down in history as one of 2024's biggest epic failures on every single level. And even beyond that, just kind of asking the question, what on earth happened with this movie? Because it's an adaptation of a very popular video game series. They had a script back in 2020 from Craig Mazin that had fantastic buzz surrounding it. They got an all-star cast. Eli Roth isn't necessarily the most obvious choice to do a movie of this genre, but he has been directing for 20 years, and then insanity took place. Something went horribly wrong in the process where they shot it 3 years ago, did reshoots 2 years later. After the reshoots, Craig Mazin petitioned to have his name removed from the film, and then a mysterious Joe Crombie was added as a screenwriter for the film, which is an obvious pseudonym. Craig Mazin swears it's not him. Some of us don't entirely believe him. And then when the movie came out, the VFX guys or the stunt guys were like, yeah, we shot a very R-rated movie with like severed limbs, blood everywhere. And then they released a PG-13 movie. It's like a film that just got absolutely butchered all throughout the process, where they never had a clear vision on the movie they wanted to make. They never knew how to properly adapt it. And so something horrible went wrong in the process. And they kept changing it, shifting it, adjusting, tweaking in the writing, with the reshoots, in the editing bay. And you get this movie that is just does not really work on any level. It's not a boring bad movie, but it is absolutely a bad movie where you can just see all the places where they reworked the film. There's segments where it montages through a sequence with voiceover because they cut the sequence, but they still wanted it in the movie, so they just use voiceover to explain what happened. There's things that aren't really set up that pay off big in the end of the film. There's things that are set up that don't really go anywhere. There's characters that are irritating and annoying. It's just a film that, it's a classic example of how movies are very collaborative. A lot of people have a voice, and sometimes that collaboration really, really, really doesn't work, despite having a lot of really good pieces at play. Number 9, The Killer. Now, there are several different movies this month that kind of like offended fans of the IP being adapted. So some people saw the trailers for Borderlands and they were utterly offended at who they had cast to play these beloved characters from the video game. But I didn't play Borderlands, so I couldn't be passionate about that and care about that at all. And then some people are really offended at the concept of doing another Crow with Eric Draven as the lead character because of Brandon Lee, his legacy, how much that performance, that film means to them. The idea of another Eric Draven adaptation just offends them. And while I'm a fan, I enjoy the original Crow. It's not one that has a special place in my heart. So I wasn't offended at Eric Draven being adapted again in The Crow. But the movie that did offend me was The Killer. On the one hand, if you don't have a backstory understanding where this movie came from and its existence, it's just another passable enough streaming movie. I'll have another one of these in a couple spots up on here that's a couple places higher. And if you don't know any better, you'll just kind of like it's an assassin movie, lighthearted, totally forgettable streaming action film. Maybe the action's a little bit cooler than some other movies. Whatever, who cares? But that's not what this is. The Killer is a remake of the 1989 film The Killer that is widely regarded as one of the greatest action movies of all time, and I would agree it's one of the greatest action movies of all time. So much so that Hollywood has been trying to remake it since the early 90s, and Walter Hill was involved, and it was going to be with Denzel Washington and Richard Gere. This was reported in the trades in the early 90s. And then they couldn't work the script out, and they had issues with it. And so then it kept bringing new writers. And then they tried to make it happen 15 years ago. It didn't happen. And then 10 years ago, John Woo, the director of the original version, signed on to remake his own movie. And for 9 years, he's been trying to get this movie made, and it finally comes out. Hollywood's been trying to do it for 30 years. 10 years, 9 years, he's been working on it himself, and you get the film, and it's just totally generic streaming action movie stuff. And to me, that is just so disheartening that John Woo made an action movie classic in The Killer, and then he reworked it, reimagined it, tweaked everything, and took his own movie, his own classic, and made it into just a stereotypical streaming action movie that just checks all the boxes, and that to be enjoyable enough, inoffensive, and totally forgettable. He converted his own classic into that, and that to me is just so saddening that that's what his career's turned into, and that's what this 30-year in development Hollywood adaptation of The Killer cranked out, where essentially they felt like they had a checklist of beats, scenes, elements that needed to be in a remake of The Killer. But the original Killer was this well-crafted movie where a girl being blinded ties into a character arc, the themes, the plot, like everything. It's a pivotal piece for everything that takes place afterwards. It kicks things in motion, and everything is tied to it in a sense. So they just keep person is blinded, but they changed the reason it happened, the effect it has on the person, the character dynamics. They do gender swaps, and so the ways characters interact with each other have a different meaning to them. And so all of a sudden, person being blinded has no greater meaning. It doesn't tie into any long-running plot points in the film. And so it's all empty. It's hollow. Everything that made the original one great is missing because it's turned into just a bunch of checkboxes instead of a well-crafted movie about regret, about love, about friendship between men and unlikely people. And it's just the action itself, besides a couple of shots here and there that have a nice, John Woo framing of someone doing something cool. Besides a couple of those, I mean, it's just nothing in comparison to the original. So for me, this is the IP adaptation of the month that was just gut-wrenching. Next up, The Crow. As I just mentioned, I enjoy the 1994 original film. I've seen it many, many times. It's never been like a personal favorite to me. And so I wasn't inherently offended at the idea of adapting Eric Draven's story again. I can absolutely understand why that would be something that wouldn't sit well with a lot of people, because Brandon Lee's legacy is so tied to that role, to that film. And obviously he lost his life in the making of that film. So I can see why that wouldn't sit well with some people, that they would choose to. If you don't know the Crow mythology, there's nothing about Eric Draven that has to be the central story. The Crow can bring back anyone. You can tell this type of story with anyone. And they chose to make it Eric Draven again, which is so peculiar because this is a reimagining that changes everything about the plot. Eric Draven's personality, Shelley's personality, how the two people meet, the structure of the story, the villain of the story, the context, everything has changed except it's Eric Draven. The one thing that would offend people is the one thing they kept, which was very foolish on their part. And when it comes to the movie, there's one awesome action set piece in the movie at an opera house where it like really leans into the nature of Eric Draven's powers from the Crow and the strengths it gives him, but also the weaknesses he still has. And so you have this one awesome action sequence, and that's it. The rest of them were very lackluster. And as that sequence was happening, I was like, if this is what the whole movie had been, this would have been a pretty cool movie. But it's not. And so you have a movie that it goes much more into the backstory of our two lead characters and their fling that they have. Even the way it's designed, I can't even call it a love story because it is much more of a fling that doesn't feel like the setup for eternal love. But it means you spend half the movie before Eric Draven becomes the Crow, and it takes even longer before he figures out how to do the Crow right. Hence, we only have one cool action set piece. The characters are so broken and so dysfunctional and weird, it's tough to really root for them with the way that they're presented to us, that are just so distant that you kind of, it doesn't make their relationship feel healthy. Thus, what takes place feels like a continuation of unhealthy, toxic behavior that you need to sort through a bunch of other things before you can buy into them being what they are. It builds out the lore in ways that almost could have been interesting, almost could have been good, but it never fully goes there. Where it introduces ideas about the main villain and what he's doing in the secret society, and you're like, okay, but that's all you get. As soon as you're like, okay, that's all you get. It's you're just you want more. You're frustrated by it. And that's what this whole movie kind of felt like to me. That they almost had all the ideas that could have made this a standout Crow film that was a reimagining. Don't do Eric Draven because you'll make people mad. Make it someone else. Your characters are different anyway. But it was just kind of the wrong calculation on everything. We needed more of the cool action from the opera house action set piece. We need more time with the main villain. Like unpacking who he is, not just scenes with him talking about his scheme, but unpacking his powers and his goals and the secret society. We need to unpack all of that. And we needed a little bit more of a bridge to these lead characters where we spend a lot of time with them. But with the way that it's told, the way that it's structured, just needed something there that made them feel like they weren't just on this toxic fling that ends in tragedy. So I don't think it's as disastrous as a lot of people are making it out to be. There are some positives to it, but also overall not great at all. Number 7, The Union, and this is the latest star-studded Netflix action comedy. This one with Mark Wahlberg and Halle Berry. And essentially, the movie is perfectly optimized to be watchable, familiar, inoffensive, and totally forgettable. It's the kind of movie that people over 35 will pull up Netflix and they go, oh, I like Mark Wahlberg. Oh, I like Halle Berry. They're doing a movie together. You watch a little bit of the trailer and there's some humor. It's a genre that you enjoy. Super easy to click on. Super easy to just kind of have on while you're entertained enough by it, but probably doing something else, checking your email, playing a game, and it's on in the background, putting a little smile on your face, while at the same time doing absolutely nothing to provide anything new to the genre or anything like that. I mean, just the movie itself, if you take it on what they present, it's pretty overtly the plot of Mission Impossible 1. Multiple elements are like that are specific, like plot point with two sub-specific things pulled straight from the first Mission Impossible film. And then it has the structure and the perspective of Men in Black as this outsider that's street smart is recruited into this secret organization that they have to be trained with. And the person that's well established is kind of taking them on their first mission. And then it has the tone and the beats of a rom-com, which is a very strange combination in one sense, but not in a way that makes it interesting. Just kind of like, okay, yeah. If you're trying to make a totally watchable, inoffensive movie that is totally unremarkable at the same time. Yeah, pull all those pieces together, and that's what this movie is. Like, I would be totally fine rewatching it if my wife wanted to rewatch it. I also would be totally fine if I never had a single thought about the film again. And that's the weird nature of so many of these streaming action movies. They're designed to be that, like fit just perfectly into that. We'll get someone to click and watch it once on a Friday night. And that's the whole goal of its existence is nothing beyond that. It did its job. It doesn't bother me or offend me the way the ones lower on the list did, but it also doesn't offer anything fresh and new either. Number 6, Rebel Moon, the director's cut. I wasn't really sure where to put this one on the list. It was a little bit tricky for me because in many ways, vast improvement on the original cuts of Rebel Moon, where just immediately you're seeing the violence that was meant to be there rather than cutting away from it. So all the action is much cooler. It's very gory, limbs being chopped off, bodies exploding. And when you go to a Zack Snyder action movie, that's kind of what you want and expect. And that's what he pitched this as, is this kind of extreme over-the-top version of space opera.
In the R-rated versions of the movie, everything is amplified. The R-rated versions of the movie have a slightly more satirical, the PG-13 movies end up being pretty earnest. They don't have sort of sex and violence to over the top them. That in the R-rated versions, because the violence is so over the top and the sex is so over the top, that the tone changes.
And so you get that version of it. It's also darker and heavier. Probably the best sequence added to the two parts is the prologue. There's this 20-minute prologue at the beginning, a totally new sequence that shows them conquering this planet. And it's brutal, it's vicious, it shows just how sick they are and how people get recruited into their army through force. Which kind of gives you some perspective on all of this stuff. You go, okay, cool. And at the same time, it didn't really fix my bigger issues with Rebel Moon, which is to say it's just too derivative. This time it does have the action, the sex, the weirdness that was supposed to be in there. So there's something. It is an improvement. It does move up substantially from the total blandness of the original ones. But the story and the characters and the lore really weren't improved for me at all. And you could say the pacing was hurt because each of them is like an hour longer. So, my big problem with part one, it was so cyclical that we go to a place, we introduce a person, we learn their backstory and their cool thing, and then we go to the next place where we recruit the person, learn their backstory, learn their cool thing, and then we have a big fight at the end where we don't really use much of any of that. It was awkward. And then the second part, we watch people in grain fields for an hour, and then we have an hour-long battle. That's all still true. It doesn't really resolve kind of any of the issues. It still feels like this is an even longer version of something that probably only needed to be, under 3 hours long as a whole, under 3 hours long. And now we have two parts that are 3 hours long, which is peculiar. And so another one where I can respect Zack Snyder's ambitions here. I like the look and the feel of it. The action's cool. I like the gnarly action, but I still can't say that I recommend Rebel Moon. Then we have Blink Twice, and I would say the pretty substantial gap between Rebel Moon and Blink Twice. This one was pretty frustrating for me because there's a lot in here that I really dug, that I thought really worked. But it's the type of movie that is built around the mystery. What's going on this island? What's happening to the people that are there? And it hinges on, does the answer to that question fully satisfy and work for you? So without being able to go into spoilers, it's tough for me to fully unpack what does and doesn't work about this movie, because all of my answers to all of that, does it work? Does it come together? Is it satisfying? It's all in the spoiler category. And it's complex and it's not simple. There's things in the payoff and answers that I thought worked very well, were very satisfying. And there's other things that I felt it just got too ambitious. It tried to tackle too much, and it got lost in all of it. And it ends on a note that I thought was completely lost. Just like, where are we going with this? This doesn't in any way tie into whatever you were trying to say before. But with the movie, on the positive side to it, Zoe Kravitz directed it. And what she does a great job of is, in the direction itself, creating this sense of disorientation, which runs throughout the whole first half of the movie, where you have these people go off to this paradise and something feels off. And we as the audience, of course, know something is off. And through the way that she cuts scenes together, whether it'll be like nighttime and it'll cut to daytime, but the same activity's taking place, and the characters don't behave as if they're behaving as if it's the same moment. The way that even like little dialogue moments are shot in this, where there's a way that films usually place the camera so audiences know what's kind of going on, and they talk about the line. You don't put the camera on the other side of the line because it disorients the audience. And this movie intentionally does that, where it starts putting the camera in places that you don't normally do that, which just creates this off sense. And there's all these things that it does to create this nightmarish off vibe while showing images of paradise and fun. And so that's all the direction. It does a great job of it. And there's also a great sense of humor to it, where characters start responding to the weird things they're seeing, and it can get very, very funny. And as things get more tense, it's able to break the tension with the humor and kind of have this back and forth. But it's a movie that's trying to also has a message it's communicating. And I think there's too many messages in there. And the metaphor of the film, everything just starts to break down with all the things it's tackling. So by the end of it, and on the specific note that it ended, I was like, oh, I just don't think you pulled it together, and I don't even know what you were saying in light of where you ended things. Number 4, M. Night Shyamalan's Trap. And this is a movie where you just have to be able to suspend a bunch of disbelief, accept the movie on its own terms, and if you can, there's a lot of fun to be had watching this serial killer attempting to escape being captured, and watching all of the little mechanisms that he uses, all the ways that he lies to people, all the twists, the turns. It's fun. And watching this peculiar Josh Hartnett performance, where it's supposed to be peculiar because he's playing a guy playing a nice, friendly person that is actually this monster, and he's kind of switching back and forth between the two of them. If you can buy into all of that, there's a lot of fun to be had here. So I had fun with it. But there's a lot of problems with the logic in this movie. You have to be able to accept a lot. There's a lot of coincidences. There's a lot of chance things that happen. And there's any number of moments you can just go like, wait, the employee just took him backstage. Wait, he just happened to know if he told this thing to this person, he'd be able to get this thing to happen. Wait, how did he do? Like, the whole movie, you can do that. Everything happens because the screenwriter decided that. Not because it feels earned, justified, or represents what would happen in reality. It's just like, to move things forward, yeah, this lie worked, and this person happened to do this. There's a lot of that in here that drags it down. I had fun with it. I could just kind of go along for the ride, but at the same time, you get to the end and be like, I wish I wish that stuff felt tighter. I wish that stuff felt earned and not like a lot of cheats. Real quick, before I give you my top 3, remember to share your ranking down below in the comment section. Remember, if there's a movie I missed that you think I would like, let me know about it down below in the comment sections. Also remember, I do have that Labor Day sale going on in my merch store. I think there's a shelf right down below where you can see a bunch of the different shirts, or there's a link in the description. I think it's 35% off right now, so that's a good sale. You're knocking a good bit off there. If you want to buy one of these amazing shirts to change your life, now's the time to do it. In third, Cuckcoo. This is actually a movie I saw twice back in the spring. Once at South by Southwest at its world premiere, and then I saw it again at the Overlook Film Festival. And just a nice offbeat horror film. that is one of these films where, a family goes off to this kind of remote location and weird stuff starts taking place and you're trying to figure out what's happening. And as it goes along, it gets weirder and crazier as it happens. It has a nice organic sense of humor where our lead character is aware that strange things are happening and everyone else is just kind of like going along with it. And so she starts calling things out as it happens. And just this very organic way where she is the voice of the audience in all of this. Nice humor to it. Now, it's a film that even having seen it twice, I'm still like, I need to watch that again. I need to read the Wikipedia page. I need to, the lore gets pretty dense, and I don't know that it all comes together and makes total sense. But it was a fun ride. There are quite a few effective situations, and I liked how bonkers it got towards the end. All right, so as we move into my top 2, this is where sometimes things get really tricky for me because movies affect us in different ways for very different reasons. And so looking at my top 2 on here, one of them is a small indie film that, independent of positive word of mouth, would not have been on my radar whatsoever. And the other one is Alien Romulus, a movie that was one of my most anticipated films of the year, from a director I thoroughly enjoy, from one of my favorite movie franchises. And so inherently, a movie in a big franchise that you enjoy, that you have been watching for your entire life, new entry comes out, it makes a big splash and an impact. Like, no matter what, a new Alien movie is one that will be on my radar. I'll be talking about it for years to come, even if I don't like it. Whereas a small indie film, it might be really good, really effective. And it's a film that also, just because it's its own little standalone thing, it doesn't make the same splash that a big franchise film will make, in particular with what I do for a living. So it's always tough for me to do these rankings at this point in time. I went back and forth as to which one I wanted to put on top, but I felt like I had to go in the direction that I ended up leaning. Our runner-up, Strange Darling. Now, this is a movie I was actually supposed to watch last September at Fantastic Fest. It had its world premiere there, and I didn't see it during the initial time that it played, but it played a second time. The buzz surrounding it was great, so I tried desperately to get into the movie, and I wasn't able to get in because there was so much buzz. It was sold out, and I kept recycling, checking back, emailing people trying to get in. Couldn't happen. And so I had to watch it once it finally officially released in theaters. And even when it released, it was only playing at one theater in town on the other end of town. Coincidentally, the exact same theater where Fantastic Fest was at last year, actually where Fantastic Fest is every year. It was only playing there, and luckily it expanded in its second weekend. I was able to go see it yesterday because this is a very cool movie and a tough one to talk about because the less you know going in, the better. The more that you just know, serial killer chase movie, a cool, classic, old school 35 millimeter cinematography. That's all you really want to know going into it, that it's this great serial killer thriller. And the more you go in with kind of a blank slate, the more that you can just enjoy the experience and have it unfold properly. It's a film that it plays around with the order of sequences and to very effective ways. It does a lot to play with our preconceived notions, our inherent biases of the way that we tend to empathize. It deals with unsympathetic victims in a way that is fascinating. That it's a very simple premise, executed in an interesting way, but also an excellent way that makes for just a great, refreshing film. In a time where you talked so much about big franchise films and factory filmmaking, where it just feels like they're cranking out films that in these genres are just so generic. And then you get something like this that's just different, and it doesn't need to be big and flashy to be great and mesmerizing. And that's what this movie's really good at, is just holding your attention. In particular, the performance from the lead actress, what she has to do and the way she's able to do it Like just chews up so many different scenes in so many different ways that are so much fun to watch. So if you can see this one, go check it out. Do your part to tell Hollywood we want more movies like this. But coming in at number 1, I am going to go Alien Romulus. And like I said, this is so tricky because at the one hand, I'm praising the last one for being this fresh, original film. And then my number 1, I go with the big franchise movie. I know what I did there. I get it. It's in particular, it's a legacy sequel that many people didn't like it because it leaned too heavily into the fan service. And once again, I contrasted it with a movie that was wholly original and fresh. I'm part of the problem. I know. And what I do on my channel is part of the problem. At the same time, this movie delivered a great alien experience, and when I think what's the movie I'll be thinking about more later on, whether it's because it's an alien movie or whatever reason you want to give it, which one am I going to be thinking about more? I'm more likely to rewatch in the future. It's probably going to be Alien Romulus by a large factor. As simple as that. For me, Fede Alvarez did a great job of copying the aesthetic of the first 2 films. And to me, that makes sense because it's set between the first 2 films. We're trying to go back to that world, that retro analog future. And this took us back to that place through the tech, through the visuals, through the sound effects. And then from there, he applied his usual bag of tricks of being really good at using the environments to create tension. And that's what he does, and does it this time in space with the xenomorph lore, and expanded all this stuff out in a way that I just thought really worked and delivered the Alien movie that I've been waiting for a very long time. There's a couple things I wasn't crazy about. I don't know that we needed to, the one CGI-ish character in there, I don't know that we needed to do that. I think there's probably a better way to either execute that idea or just should have gone with a different idea because it has uncanny valley to it. And in a film filled with awesome practical effects, you got one thing that really doesn't look right. And then the last 10 minutes where it goes, that's not where I would go. Watching it a second time, I was okay with it because I'd rewatched Prometheus and I was like, okay, I see what you're doing here. Fair enough. Not what I would do. Fair enough. It doesn't spoil the movie for me at all. And so in general, I think easily this is the 3rd best Alien film that we've ever received. And Fede Alvarez, I can't wait to see what he's going to do next. So for those reasons, it comes in at number 1. Let me know your ranking down below in the comment section. Check out that little shelf down below or the link down below if you need one of these I Talk Movies Too Much shirts. They are on sale for the next few days. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.